Dear Mother, I was visited again by the trio today. It's been some time since I last met with all three in person. Their presence grounds me. Of course, I constantly hear their voices in my mind, guiding me, encouraging me, uplifting me. But seeing them with my own eyes once more strengthens my resolve and helps me push away those doubts that creep in. Sari, Ezra, Victor, Bolt, and I made our way to the airship, the greatest treasure, after gathering our things from the Whistling Bull. There is a hulking tower in the middle of Balin's berth with dozens of airships docked beside it. We were directed to Floor 4, Port 3, to board our ship. We began to ascend the stairs when I suddenly noticed, out of the corner of my eye, a flash of black fur. A single owl feather then floated to the ground. I asked the others to head to the airship without me, explaining that I needed just a moment to myself. I quickly followed the slithery tail of the fang down an alleyway. Waiting for me around the corner were the claw, the fang, and the talon, standing before me in their humanoid forms. I have forgotten how superbly beautiful they each are. The talon with her piercing honey amber eyes, the claw with her mane of gleaming thick waves, the fang with an ever-playful smile on her lips. The trio praised me for my choice of companions. This came as both a surprise and a relief. I want so badly to please my ladies, and it is a comfort to know that I am making choices that will propel me along the path they have paved. At the same time, Sari, Victor, Ezra, Bolt, and I are certainly an unlikely team. We have a wanted wizard carrying a tome of powerful, heavily classified magic, a blind knife dancer turned bounty hunter, a warforged who find themselves lost despite having traveled all of Aneria, a soldier who communes with her gods through a flute-turned spear, and a runaway nobody whose sheltered upbringing is a constant stumbling block of frustration. The one thing we all seem to have in common are our dysfunctional families. The trio advised that I would find something special in a Hollow Bend sanctum, an item that looks surreal and out of place in this world. I have no idea what they mean, but I suspect I'll understand when I see it. I asked for the help of the Fang on my journey. It is comforting to know she will be close by. Before they sent me along my way, the trio bestowed their blessing upon me and my comrades, a boon of rest and recovery. I am most grateful for their generosity. I suspect we may run into more trouble before the day is done. I have somehow been selected by the group to be a temporary leader. I fear I am an imposter, Avosia Ferricu, the charlatan of Six Hills. I have agreed to head the party for the time being. I felt it impolite to refuse such an offer, even if I am unqualified. Sari has been most encouraging and, quite naturally, is my second in command. By vote or by appointment, she has no choice. The greatest treasure is a profoundly modest airship. Ship is perhaps a bit of a generous description. The vessel was quite literally falling apart from the moment we boarded to the moment we arrived at our destination. The owner and the ship's captain is a white kobold who calls himself Kes. His clothing, though filthy from tinkering with the mechanics of the airship, was expertly adorned with all the tools of his trade. A frying pan hung from his belt, and a large fishhook that ran the length of his spine was strapped to his back. I shudder to think of the monsters Kes may be trying to lure with a hook that size. However, what he lacks in fashion sense, he makes up for with his sparkling personality. He was very proud to show us around the ship, except for his engine room, which he kept under lock and key. He built her from scratch with his own 2 hands. A labor of love indeed. We set off on our flight to Hollow Bend Forest, a small thicket just off the long road, about 15 miles southwest of Six Hills. The journey was energizing. The air at such an elevation is unimaginable. It almost has its own fragrance, a bouquet of crisp and colorful auras. But more than the scent was a feeling of renewal and peace, as if the wind that kissed my face and filled my lungs had some sort of miraculous affection. I think I like flying. As we approached the forest and began our descent, we spied a large wagon, which we assume belongs to Ainor Elovir, the gnome we've been sent to retrieve. One by one, we climbed down from the airship on a rather frayed-looking rope ladder, Amazingly, we all made it down the ladder unscathed. It even held Bolt's mass of metal. The wagon, which we found in a small clearing, had a broken axle and was turned on its side. It didn't appear to be occupied, but we approached with caution nonetheless. It was empty. The ground was littered with several broken jars of pungent spices. Ainur Elovir is a distinguished and honored chef. It doesn't surprise me that an artist of her caliber would travel with her medium of choice. Victor quickly picked up the scent of the spices and began following it deep into the woods. There were small drops of blood along the way. Not enough to confirm an untimely death, but enough to suspect someone had been hurt. We followed Victor down a rugged trail that ended before a stone archway. The archway seemed so out of place in the middle of the woods. Could this be the item the trio alluded to? There was an air of foreboding about the carefully placed stone. I don't know how I'm expected to be a leader to a group of headstrong sovereign soldiers. While we began discussing how to best approach the archway, Sari walked right through it, followed shortly thereafter by Victor, on the other end of a rope anchored to a tree. Ezra, Bolt, and I watched as both Sari and Victor vanished into thin air as they crossed the archway's threshold. My stomach began to tie itself into knots. I couldn't abandon Ezra and Bolt, but who knew what we would find on the other side of the entrance that poor Victor and Sari were now left to tackle alone? Ezra, the gifted wizard that he is, could sense the presence of time magic from the arch. We all looked at one another, our eyes wide. Time magic is barred by the Arcanum. If they find out we've been participating in the practice of time magic, I can only imagine what the repercussions will be. But we couldn't leave Victor and Sari on their own. I held my breath and closed my eyes as I stepped through the archway. Curiously, we all seemed to arrive on the other side of the portal in tandem. This confirmed Ezra's suspicions about the chronergy magic in use. We found ourselves in a courtyard surrounded by a massive forest, comprised of beautiful trees with the most splendid leaves. Encircling the courtyard were 3 identical archways. We turned around to find the archway we had traveled through had disappeared. Each of the 3 archways before us sported a magical barrier of sorts, almost like a fine, luminous fabric had been draped inside each of the entrances. The first was covered by a translucent blue barrier. When looking through and beyond the barrier, the forest appeared to change to a winter scene. Instead of beautiful green leaves upon the trees, the limbs were bare, and the ground covered in thick white snow. The second archway donned an orange barrier, beyond which the forest appeared burnt. The trees were a scorched charcoal black, not a hint of life in sight. The sky was a dull gray with ominous thin clouds hanging to it. The third barrier was purple. Beyond this veil was not a forest, but a large and complicated-looking labyrinth of purple crystals, twists and turns, angles and bends, as far as the eye could see. In the center of the courtyard was a small, stone-crafted fish pond. Within the pond stood 3 podiums. Atop one of the podiums was a cylindrical pillar with a teardrop etched into the side of it. At the foot of the podiums were several dead mudmen, like the ones we had fought at the festival. We weren't sure what we were looking at and began to contemplate our situation when we heard a peculiar voice. The owner of the voice was a pink fairy dragon who calls herself Glitterbug. I can't speak for the others in our group, but I, for one, was amazed by this marvelous creature. She appeared out of nowhere, and in the blink of an eye could move from Sari's shoulder to on top of Ezra's head. She reminded me of a serpent, but with arms and legs and the wings of a butterfly. She had little horns growing out of her head and the most friendly and mischievous smile. Glitterbug is quite cheeky, and I'm not sure if she's been completely forthcoming with us, but here is what we have learned. Hollow Bend Sanctum is a crucible of sorts, a series of tests that prove a person's worth. Glitterbug is the guardian of the sanctum and unable to leave at will. Recently, a darkness has spread in the burned forest. There's another guardian who resides there. His name is Ambaris. But since the arrival of the darkness, Glitterbug can no longer feel his presence. Because Glitterbug cannot leave the sanctum, she sent her friends, the Mudmen and the Rock Elemental, for help, but they lost sight of their goal and attacked. The only way out of the sanctum is by completing the tests. Ainur Elevir is within the sanctum and is currently in the archway with the purple shroud. As we were digesting the information provided by Glitterbug, Bolt began inspecting the blue teardrop pillar. Bolt reached out their metal finger and touched the teardrop. Instantly, their body was wrapped in a cloud of faint blue light. They promptly walked toward the archway with the blue barrier and walked through to the other side. Victor hopped to his feet and followed Bolt through the same archway. However, Victor was unable to pass and fell to the ground, shivering with cold. It became clear that we all must touch the teardrop before crossing the threshold. When I touched the teardrop, I looked toward the archway, but the blue barrier had vanished. We all made our way through the pass and into the wintry forest. Once again, when we turned back to the archway, it had disappeared. There was a winding path cut through the frozen trees. The only way out was to move forward. The sun shone on the glittering snow. As we traveled along the icy path, Glitterbug's voice rang through the woods. Ice and frost, found and lost, lovers turned to hate. Fur and fangs, silky manes, peace is far too late. Win the war to best the floor and free them from their state. It all sounded very convoluted and mysterious, but soon her meaning became clear. We entered a small clearing where we found a humanoid suspended in the air beneath the branches of a tree. Upon further inspection, we realized the body was stuck in a massive web of shiny white spider silk. As we approached the tree, 2 massive spiders emerged. They weren't immediately hostile and seemed willing to speak with us. We asked if they had seen a gnome pass through, but they hadn't. Before we could ask any more questions, a pack of large white wolves entered the clearing, teeth bared and growling. As they charged forward to attack the spiders, one of them screamed, "Death to the traitor queen!" The spiders were soon encircled by the snarling beasts. I thought it best to stay out of the conflict. We had no allegiance to the spiders. We had only just met them. But, yet again, the forces I've been elected to lead have a will of their own, and soon Bolt was in the middle of the fray. What could I do but laugh and jump right in? Seredan expertly took down the first of the 4 wolves. Her spear sliced through the air, and I could hear the gentle hum of the choir above the yelp of the mutt. I looked to Bolt to find a chain of barbed wire unraveling from their arm. They told me later that it was an improvement they had implemented the other night at the Bull's Whistle. As Bolt was whipping their chain around, I turned to see the most magnificent magic erupting from Ezra's hands, shooting across the clearing, completely annihilating another of the wolves. Victor's knives were flying about, slicing tufts of fur here and there. For the first time since I've been in combat with Victor, one of his knives returned to his hand after he threw it. I witnessed the same phenomenon with Yinny in our sparring match. It's as if Victor is controlling the knife with his mind. That, or the knife has a mind of its own. Regardless of the mechanics, the knives are effective, and Victor took down the 3rd wolf. The final wolf, completely outnumbered, turned to run. I stuck it with my longsword, and the wolves were no more. We turned to the 2 large spiders for an explanation. What had these wolves meant by the traitor queen? They explained that years and years ago, the king and queen of this land were raising their daughter, the princess, together. Apparently, the king and queen couldn't agree on how to rear her, and their disagreement ultimately ended in their daughter's death. The king, queen, and their subjects were cursed for their actions, and the entire kingdom was transformed. The queen and her followers were turned into giant spiders. The king and his transformed into huge wolves. The 2 spiders spun us a silk handkerchief as a symbol of endorsement. We were instructed to give it to the Winter Queen. We left the spiders and continued forward along the path. After some time, we came upon another clearing. This one had 4 large plants in it. The first had beautiful tube-like flowers, like that of a honeysuckle. The next had 2 hemispheres with sharp spines along the edges, like a terrifying, starving mouth. The 3rd plant was dripping with a golden nectar, and the last displayed a singular white bell-shaped blossom. In the middle of the plants, and facing the plant with the teeth, was another humanoid who had been completely turned to stone. Ezra approached the dripping plant and bravely dipped his finger in the nectar. As he brought his finger to his mouth, he declared his actions were in the name of science, and he ingested the honey-like substance. His eyes met Victor's, and it was immediately clear that the nectar was some sort of love potion. Ezra spent the next hour absolutely enamored with Victor. Every word Victor said was suddenly brilliant. After Ezra's little experiment, we were a bit more careful with the other plants. Bolt was able to extract some acid from the honeysuckle. Victor smashed the ferocious-looking plant with its most recent victim, and I picked the white bell blossom. Ezra inspected it for me. Well, he inspected it for Victor, really, and discovered that the flower, called a divine bulb, has magical properties that can create both food and water. I think it will come in handy. Beyond the plants, we found that the path forked. The spiders had told us that the queen would be to the left, the king to the right. At some point in our scuffle with the wolves, they revealed that they had seen a gnome, which we can only assume is Ainur Elovir. The group looked to me for a decision of which direction we should head. Because we were guaranteed safety with the spiders, thanks to our handkerchief, we turned left. There are few things more unsettling than entering a den of spiders. Their little ticks and clicks reverberated in my ears. Thousands of blinking, shining eyes watched us from the darkness. As promised, the handkerchief did indeed grant us an audience with the queen. The queen was the largest of the spiders. Despite being a hairy arachnid, she had a regal air about her. The queen confirmed the story of the curse, adding that the only way to break the curse is to end the war. She implied that ending the war could only happen through death. I can only begin to imagine the pain she feels. I weep in the dark of night longing for you, Mother, but I at least have the comfort of knowing you are alive. If you were dead, and as a direct result of my own actions, there's no telling what I would do. A broken heart often oozes rage. Victor and I argued that perhaps the queen and king could reconcile their differences, but the queen wouldn't hear it. She wanted blood. We needed to get to the wolves to discover Ainur's whereabouts, so we reluctantly answered the queen's call to arms. We each climbed onto the back of a spider and rode them into battle. We arrived at the mouth of a massive cave, a gaping hole in the side of a giant mountain. The den of spiders was terrifying, but a cave housing an extensive pack of wolves? My knees nearly buckled at the thought of what awaited us. We meekly approached the king, who we found alone in the cave. His subjects had been sent to fight the attacking spider army. Reason hadn't worked with the queen, but we hoped the king would come to his senses. Victor's voice echoed through the cave as he spoke, his voice bouncing off the walls, a gentle reiteration to drive his words home. He asked the king if he remembered his daughter's laugh, a simple question that stopped the king in his tracks. Would you be surprised if I told you that a terrible curse and a raging war born of spiteful words could be ended with a laugh? Unbelievable? Yes. But true? Absolutely. I believe I have misjudged Victor. When someone introduces themselves as a bounty hunter, it's easy to label them as a heartless, blood-hungry monster. But after hearing him reason with the Wolf King, I realize he and I are not so different. We both love our family deeply. Family can shape us into a more refined form. We can be transformed through their love. Hearing Victor speak of love and family has me convinced that he is more than just a bounty hunter, more than just a knife dancer. He is a son, and I can tell he takes that title very seriously. The Wolf King thanked Victor for his goodness and left the cave to make amends with the queen, his wife. As he left, an archway appeared. Finally, a way out. It seems we passed our first test. We took a look around the cave and found a small pile of treasure. Within the pile was a stone shaft with a flame carved into the side. We filled our pockets with the items worth keeping and made our way through the archway. We found ourselves once again in the courtyard. I'm already feeling a bit wary, and we're only 1/3 of the way through this test. The purple barrier is our next nemesis. Who knows what conflict awaits us on the other side? Love, Eve.